John Miller's head pounded as he opened his eyes. The room spun around him. This wasn't the hotel where he had been working security. The walls were made of some kind of metal he had never seen before. They seemed to glow with a faint blue light. John tried to sit up but found his wrists and ankles bound to a cold table. 20 years as a Marine had taught him not to panic. He took a deep breath and assessed his situation. The last thing he remembered was standing guard outside the conference room at the Summit Hotel in Denver. Then there had been a strange light, and now he was here. Wherever here was. A door slid, open with a hiss. John turned his head and froze. The creature that entered wasn't human. It stood about 7 feet tall with leathery green skin and eyes that reminded John of a snake's. It wore what looked like some sort of uniform. "The specimen is awake," the creature said. Its mouth moved strangely with the words, as if it wasn't used to speaking English. A second creature entered the room. "Good. The Emperor will be pleased with this one." Strong physical specimen. John found his voice. "Where am I? Who are you?" The creatures looked at each other, seeming surprised. "It speaks," the first one said. "The translator must be working." The second creature approached John. "You are aboard the Vexitari collection vessel Drogath. I am Chief Hunter Srax." "Why am I here?" John asked, pulling against his restraints. "Your species is considered quite primitive by galactic standards, but physically impressive. The Emperor enjoys collecting specimens from developing worlds." John felt a chill run through him. "Specimens? You mean like animals in a zoo?" The creature called Srax made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Not exactly. Your kind make excellent servants. Some of you are already in the palace. The Emperor has taken a special interest in humans." John's military training kicked in. He needed information. "There are others like me? Other humans?" "Many. We have been collecting for decades. Your world is kept isolated by decree of Emperor Zolkrax. No contact is permitted with primitive species until they reach a certain technological threshold." "Earth isn't primitive," John argued. "We have space travel, advanced medicine." "You haven't even colonized your own solar system," Srax interrupted. "The Galactic Confederation has existed for 50,000 years. Compared to us, you are children." A voice came over what must have been a speaker system. John couldn't understand the words, but the creatures responded immediately. "We will be arriving at Nexus Prime in 3 cycles," Srax said to John. "You will be presented to the Emperor as a gift." After the creatures left, John tested his restraints again. They were too strong. He needed to be patient and look for an opportunity. Hours passed. John drifted in and out of sleep. A strange tingling sensation in his head woke him once. It felt like something was crawling inside his brain. When the door opened again, a different creature entered. This one was smaller, with blue skin and 4 arms. It carried what looked like food. "Eat," it said in perfect English. "Long journey ahead." John stared at the creature. "How can I understand you now?" "Neural translator. Implanted while you sleep. Standard procedure for all new acquisitions." John felt sick at the word acquisitions, but the translator gave him an idea. If he could understand them, he could learn more about where he was going. As days passed, John listened carefully to every conversation near his cell. He learned that Earth had been deliberately kept isolated. The Emperor feared human adaptability and aggression. Our development was being artificially stunted. John made a promise to himself. He would find a way to escape, and somehow he would make the Emperor and this Galactic Confederation pay for what they had done to humanity. When the ship's engines changed pitch, John knew they were arriving at their destination. Through a small window in his cell, he caught his first glimpse of Nexus Prime, an enormous structure that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. The heart of a galactic civilization that saw his entire species as nothing more than servants and curiosities. His journey was just beginning. The ship docked at what looked like an enormous space station. John was moved from his cell and marched through wide corridors. Other creatures of all shapes and sizes stepped aside as the Vextari guards led him forward. Some pointed and stared. John kept his head high and his eyes alert, searching for any chance to escape. They entered a large holding area with dozens of cells. In one of them, John spotted another human. A woman with short brown hair sat on a small bench, watching him with curious eyes. When the guards locked John in the cell across from hers, she moved to the edge of her cell. "You're new," she said. "Straight from Earth?" John nodded. "Name's John Miller, former Marine, taken 3 days ago. Lisa Carter. I've been here 6 years." She spoke quietly, making sure the guards couldn't hear. "They got me while I was hiking in Colorado." John gripped the bars of his cell. 6 years? How many humans are there out here? Thousands, maybe. More. Most work as servants in rich houses or on pleasure ships. Some fight in the arenas for sport. Lisa sighed. "I work in the kitchens at the Senate building. That's where they're taking us now." "What exactly is this place?" John asked, looking around at the massive structure outside the window. "Nexus Prime. It's the capital of the Galactic Confederation. Every species with space travel has representatives here. Well, except humans." John felt anger building inside him. "Tell me about this Senate and the Emperor." Lisa looked around to make sure no guards were listening. "The Senate is supposed to be democratic. Representatives from thousands of worlds make decisions together. But Emperor Zolkrax controls everything from behind the scenes. His species, the Archelians, have ruled for 500 years. But why keep Earth isolated?" John asked. "Fear," Lisa whispered. "Human adaptability scares them. We learn faster than most species. The Archelians worry that if humans joined the galactic community, we might rise too quickly." A Vextari guard approached. Lisa quickly moved away from the bars and sat down. 2 hours later, the prisoners were loaded onto a smaller transport ship. Through the windows, John saw the true scale of Nexus Prime. It was a massive ring-shaped structure with thousands of buildings and ships moving in all directions. In the distance, a huge dome rose above everything else. "That's the Senate building," Lisa explained when she noticed John staring. "The Emperor rarely leaves it." The transport landed on a platform near the dome. The prisoners were unloaded and sorted into groups. John noticed how different species were treated differently. Some were handled roughly while others were treated with respect. "Caste system," Lisa whispered as they walked. "Your place depends on your species. Humans are near the bottom." John watched everything carefully. He noticed the security patterns, the weapons the guards carried, and the layout of the buildings. His military training had taught him to always look for advantages. They entered a massive kitchen area where dozens of beings worked preparing strange foods. An overseer, a fat blue alien with 6 arms, pointed at Lisa. "Back to your station," he barked. Then he looked at John. "New one. Strong. Take him to heavy lifting." John was led deeper into the building by another guard. As they walked, he caught glimpses of grand halls and important-looking aliens in fancy clothes. They went down several levels until they reached a storage area. "You work here now," the guard said, handing John over to yet another alien supervisor. "Lift boxes, move supplies." John nodded obediently, but inside his mind was racing. He was now inside the Senate building, the heart of the empire that had been stealing humans for years. The place where Emperor Zolkrax ruled. As he began lifting heavy containers, John smiled to himself. The fools had brought him exactly where he needed to be. Now he just needed to learn more and find allies. Somehow he would make them pay for what they had done to humanity. John spent 3 days lifting heavy boxes and learning the layout of the lower levels of the Senate building. He memorized the guard rotations and studied the different alien species. When the supervisors weren't looking, he spoke with other workers, many of whom were also from primitive worlds. On the 4th day, John saw his chance. During a shift change, there was a 5-minute gap in the security coverage of the storage area. John slipped through an air duct he had secretly loosened earlier. The duct was tight, but he squeezed through and emerged in a maintenance tunnel. John moved quickly through the tunnel, following a mental map he had created based on conversations with other workers. He emerged in a busy service corridor and stole a uniform jacket from a hook on the wall. With the jacket on, he looked like any other worker. He made his way up several levels, careful to avoid security checkpoints. His goal was to reach the upper levels where he might find allies or a way to contact Earth. As he rounded a corner, he bumped into Lisa. Her eyes widened in surprise. "John, what are you doing here? They're looking for you downstairs." "I need to find a way out," John whispered. "Or at least find someone who can help." Lisa looked nervous but then nodded. "Follow me. Stay close and act like you belong here." She led him through busy kitchen areas and then down a service elevator. Instead of going up as John had planned, they went deeper, below the main building. "Where are we going?" John asked quietly. "To people who can actually help you," Lisa replied. "People who fight back." The elevator stopped at a level not shown on any of the maps John had seen. Lisa led him through a maze of old tunnels until they reached a heavy door. She knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. The door opened to reveal a large room filled with strange technology and about 20 beings of different species. Some were human. A tall woman with gray hair stepped forward. "Lisa. Who is this?" "His name is John Miller. Fresh from Earth, Karen. He escaped on his own from the lower service level." The woman named Karen studied John carefully. "A fighter?" "Marine," John answered. 20 years service." Karen nodded slowly. "We could use someone with military training. I'm Karen Walsh. I was taken from Earth 30 years ago." She gestured around the room. "Welcome to the underground. We're a resistance group working against Emperor Zolkrax and his corrupt government." John looked around the room with new interest. "You're fighting the Emperor?" "We're trying," said a reptilian alien who stepped forward. "I am Drac. My world was destroyed by the Emperor's forces when we refused to join the Confederation on his terms." Karen led John to a table covered with maps and strange devices. "We've been gathering evidence of the Emperor's crimes for years. Genocide, slavery, resource theft from developing worlds like Earth." "Why haven't you exposed him?" John asked. A small blue alien with 4 arms laughed. "The Emperor controls all major communication systems, and most Senate members benefit from the current system." John studied the people around him. They looked tired but determined. "What's your plan?" Karen pressed a button on the table. A hologram appeared showing the main Senate chamber. "In 3 days, the Emperor will address the full Senate. All representatives from all worlds will be there. We plan to broadcast our evidence during his speech," said Drac. "But we've tried similar plans before. They always block our signal." John stared at the hologram, an idea forming in his mind. What if you had a distraction? Something they couldn't ignore or censor? Karen looked at him curiously. "What kind of distraction?" "The kind that would shock the entire galaxy," John said, his eyes fixed on the image of the Emperor's platform. "Something that would show everyone that humans aren't the weak primitives they think we are." The room fell silent as everyone realized what John was suggesting. "You want to physically confront the Emperor?" Karen asked in disbelief. "That's suicide." John smiled grimly. "Not if we plan it right." The members of the underground stared at John in shock. The idea of physically confronting Emperor Zolkrax seemed impossible. The Emperor was always surrounded by guards and security systems. "Let me explain," John said, pointing to the hologram of the Senate chamber. "Your plan to broadcast evidence is good, but it won't work alone. The Emperor controls the media. He can block your signal or call it fake news." Karen crossed her arms. "And your plan is better? 1 human against the Emperor's guards?" John shook his head. "Not just 1 human. I'll need help. But think about what would happen if at the exact moment you broadcast your evidence, someone physically confronted the Emperor. Something so shocking that no one could look away." Drac, the reptilian alien, made a clicking sound with his tongue. "The Emperor's security will kill you before you get within 10 feet of him." A thin man with glasses stepped forward. "Not necessarily." He had been quiet until now. "I'm Ryan, physicist from Earth. Been here 12 years. He pointed at the hologram. The Senate chamber has special security. No energy weapons work there to protect the representatives. Is that true? John asked Karen. She nodded. Yes, security relies on physical guards and special shields. But those guards are elite fighters from the strongest warrior races. John smiled. But they've never fought a human marine. Our species has been perfecting the art of combat against each other for thousands of years. The room fell silent as everyone considered this. Here's my plan, John continued. While you broadcast your evidence, I create a distraction by challenging the Emperor directly. Something so dramatic that every camera will be on me. Something they can't censor or ignore. Like what? Lisa asked. Like physically overpowering him, showing the entire galaxy that their superior emperor can be beaten by a human, a species they consider primitive. John's eyes gleamed with determination. The emperor's power comes from fear and the belief that his species is superior. I'll shatter that belief. Karen walked slowly around the table, thinking. The symbolism would be powerful. A human from Earth, a world they've kept isolated and primitive, physically dominating the Emperor. But how do we get John into the Senate chamber? Asked Ryan. Security will be extremely tight. Drac raised a clawed hand. I may have a solution. Senator Zilpax from the Vega system secretly supports our cause. He could bring a human servant with him. Would he take that risk? Karen asked. For this plan? Perhaps, Drac replied. Ryan studied the hologram closely. I could modify a personal shield to give John extra protection. Make it look like standard servant equipment but enhance it. John nodded. I also need to know everything about the Emperor's species. Physical weaknesses, combat abilities, everything. Karen typed on a console and an image of an Archelian appeared. The Emperor's species had 6 limbs, a thick exoskeleton, and stood nearly 8 feet tall. They're physically stronger than humans, Karen explained, but slower. Their exoskeleton protects them but limits flexibility. John studied the image carefully. Joints are always vulnerable, even with an exoskeleton. And the neck. For the next hour they discussed details. How John would enter the Senate chamber, the timing of the broadcast, escape routes. Not everyone was convinced, but John's confidence was contagious. His military experience showed in how he addressed each problem with a practical solution. This is still extremely dangerous, Karen said finally. The chances of success are small, and the cost of failure is death. John looked around at the group, his face serious. On Earth we have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I'm not going to do nothing. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Ryan spoke up. I'll start working on the shield modifications. Drac nodded. I will contact Senator Zilpax. One by one, the others offered their help. The plan was taking shape. John looked at the hologram of the Senate chamber, focusing on the Emperor's platform. 3 days from now, the galaxy will know that humans aren't to be underestimated. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. John trained harder than he had since his days in Marine boot camp. He spent hours studying the layout of the Senate chamber and learning about the Emperor's species. Ryan worked on modifying a servant's shield device. This will give you about 15 seconds of enhanced protection, he explained as John tried it on. Not enough to stop everything, but it might save your life. Lisa helped John practice moving like a servant. Keep your eyes down, she instructed. Never look directly at a senator or official. Move slowly and stay against the walls. Karen brought in another human to train with John. Sam was a former boxer who had been in the galactic community for 5 years. He was shorter than John, but built like a tank. The Archelians are strong, Sam said as they sparred in a makeshift ring. But they rely on that strength too much. They don't expect anyone to challenge them physically. John practiced fighting against Sam, who mimicked the Archelian fighting style as best he could. John learned to use the Archelians' size and weight against them. Drac returned with good news. Senator Zilpax has agreed to help. He will bring John as part of his delegation. The senator hates the Emperor. The Emperor ordered attacks on Zilpax's home colony years ago. On the night before the Senate address, the group gathered for a final meeting. Karen unrolled a detailed map of the Senate chamber. "Senator Zilpax's seat is here," she said, pointing. "John, you'll enter with his group and stay by the wall with the other servants until the broadcast begins." Ryan handed John a small device. "Put this in your ear. We'll be able to talk to you. When I say now, that means our broadcast has begun." John nodded, slipping the device into his pocket. "And the escape plan?" Karen's face grew serious. "There isn't a good one. The best we can hope for is confusion after you confront the Emperor. During that chaos, head for this exit." She pointed to a service door. "Some of our people will be waiting." The room fell silent. Everyone knew this mission was likely a one-way trip for John. Lisa stepped forward and handed John a small metal object. "This is a data crystal with messages from humans here to families on Earth. If you somehow make it back." John took the crystal and put it in his pocket. "I'll make sure they get them." Later that night, John couldn't sleep. He sat in his small room thinking about Earth. He had no family left there, no one who would miss him. His life had been the Marines, and now this mission seemed like the most important one he would ever have. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Karen. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, sitting across from him. John shook his head, thinking about tomorrow. "You know, I've been fighting the Emperor for 20 years, Karen said quietly. "Gathering evidence, planning, building networks. But your plan, it's either brilliant or suicidal." "Maybe both," John admitted with a small smile. Karen studied him for a moment. "Why are you doing this? You barely know us. You could try to escape, find a way back to Earth." John was quiet for a moment before answering. "On Earth, I protected people. It was my job, my purpose. Out here, humans need protection even more." He looked at his hands. "And maybe Earth does too. If what you say is true, the Emperor has been holding back our entire species." Karen nodded. Slowly. "Just remember, tomorrow isn't just about revenge or making a point. It's about changing the system. The broadcast needs to go through, and the Senate needs to see what happens." "I understand," John said. "The physical confrontation is symbolic. It shows that humans, that any primitive species, can stand up to power." As Karen left, John lay back on his bed. Tomorrow, he would either die or change the galaxy forever. Strangely, he felt calm. He had a mission again, a purpose, and he was good at missions. Morning came too quickly. John dressed in the servant uniform provided by Senator Zilpax's people. The clothes were simple, gray, and designed to make the wearer invisible, perfect for a servant, and perfect for John's plan. Drac helped John attach the shield device to his belt. It looked like standard servant equipment, but Ryan had modified it to provide much stronger protection. "Remember, it will only work for 15 seconds at full power," Drac reminded him. John nodded and slipped the small earpiece in. He tested it once. "Can you hear me?" Loud and clear, Ryan's voice came through. He was already at his position, in the underground's communications center. A tall, thin alien with purple skin entered the room. "Senator Zilpax's transport is ready," he said. "We must go now." John followed the alien through a series of tunnels until they reached a private landing pad. A sleek ship waited there, its doors open. Inside, John saw Senator Zilpax for the first time. The senator was an impressive sight. Nearly 9 feet tall with shimmering golden scales and 4 arms. He wore elaborate robes with symbols John didn't recognize. "So you are the human who plans to change everything today," Zilpax said in a deep voice. "Brave, but perhaps foolish." "Sometimes foolish actions are the only ones that work," John replied. Zilpax made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Indeed. My people have a saying, the most surprising attack is the one no one believes possible. Today you will surprise many." The flight to the Senate building was short. John kept his head down as they landed on a private platform. Several, Other servants exited the ship first, followed by John. Senator Zilpax came last, walking slowly with dignity. Guards checked everyone's identification. John held his breath as they scanned the fake ID the underground had provided. The guard barely looked at it before waving him through. The Senate building was even more impressive inside. Massive halls with ceilings hundreds of feet high. Beings from thousands of worlds moved through the corridors. John stayed with Zilpax's group, keeping his eyes down like Lisa had taught him. They entered the main Senate chamber, and John had to stop himself from gasping. The room was enormous, with thousands of seats arranged in circles around a central platform. The platform was where the Emperor would speak. Zilpax moved to his assigned seat. The other servants arranged themselves against the wall, and John did the same. From his position, he had a clear view of the Emperor's platform. All in position, Ryan's voice came through the earpiece. Broadcast equipment is ready. We're just waiting for the Emperor now. John checked his watch. 20 minutes until the Emperor's speech was scheduled to begin. He studied the room, confirming what he already knew from the plans. 6 main exits, guards at each one. The Emperor would enter from a private door behind the platform. Gradually, the chamber filled. Representatives from across the galaxy took their seats. Some looked like humans. Others were completely alien. Clouds of gas contained in special suits, creatures with dozens of limbs, beings made of what looked like living crystal. 10 minutes, Ryan said in John's ear. Our people report the Emperor is on his way. John felt strangely calm. His heart rate was steady, his breathing normal. It was the same feeling he had experienced in combat on Earth. Focus, clarity, purpose. A loud tone sounded, and the chamber fell silent. A voice announced something in a language John didn't understand, but he knew what it meant. The Emperor was arriving. The private door behind the platform opened. 8 guards entered first, tall Archelians in gleaming armor. They took positions around the platform. Then Emperor Zolkrax entered. He was larger than John expected, nearly 10 feet tall, with a thick exoskeleton that gleamed under the lights. His 6 limbs moved with surprising grace for his size. He wore no crown, but his head crest was decorated with jewels that caught the light. The being who had kept Earth isolated, who had ordered humans kidnapped and used as servants, who had destroyed entire species that opposed him. John's target. He's here, Ryan whispered in the earpiece. 2 minutes until broadcast begins. Emperor Zolkrax stood tall on the platform, his 6 arms spread wide in greeting to the Senate. The chamber went completely silent as he prepared to speak. His voice boomed through the hall, deep and powerful. Representatives of the Great Galactic Confederation, the Emperor began. We gather today to celebrate 500 years of peace under Archelian guidance. John listened as the Emperor spoke about unity and prosperity. Every word was a lie. John had seen the suffering of countless beings under the Emperor's rule. Now, Ryan's voice suddenly came through John's earpiece. All around the Senate chamber, screens that normally showed the Emperor's face suddenly changed. They now displayed images of destroyed worlds, slave camps, and secret documents. The underground's evidence was broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy. Confused voices filled the chamber. The Emperor stopped speaking, his head turning to look at the screens. His guards moved closer to him, sensing trouble. This was John's moment. He stepped away from the wall, pulling off his servant's outer robe. Underneath, he wore a simple black outfit that would let him move freely. John began walking directly toward the Emperor's platform. A guard spotted him and moved to intercept. John didn't slow down. Years of combat training took over. The guard reached for him, but John was faster. He ducked under the guard's arm, used the alien's momentum against him, and sent him crashing to the floor. Shouts filled the chamber as more guards rushed toward John, but they were used to scared, compliant servants, not a trained Marine. John activated Ryan's modified shield. A blue glow surrounded him as he charged forward. Energy weapons fired, but the shield absorbed the blasts. John counted in his head. 15 seconds of protection. He reached the stairs to the platform with 5 seconds left. 2 more guards blocked his path. John didn't slow down. He tackled the first guard, using the shield's energy to add force to his impact. Both of them crashed into the second guard. The shield died just as John reached the top of the platform. The Emperor stood there, looking shocked that anyone would dare approach him. "Human!" the Emperor roared, recognizing John's species. "How dare you?" John didn't waste time talking. The Emperor was stronger, but John had studied his weaknesses. He moved in fast, ducking under the Emperor's first swing. The Emperor had 6 arms, but had grown used to no one fighting back. John struck at the Emperor's knee joint, just as Sam had taught him. Even through the exoskeleton, the blow hurt. The Emperor stumbled. Cameras that had been broadcasting the evidence now turned to focus on this incredible scene. A human physically fighting the Emperor. John spoke loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "I am John Miller of Earth, a world you've kept isolated and stolen people from for decades." The Emperor swung again, catching John in the shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he kept moving. He had to make this moment count. "Your lies end today." John shouted, dodging another blow and landing one of his own. The Senate chamber was in chaos. Some representatives fled. Others stood watching in shock. Security forces were trying to reach the platform, but the crowd slowed them down. The Emperor was growing angry, his movements becoming wilder. John used this to his advantage, staying close to make the Emperor's long limbs less effective. "The people of Earth and every oppressed world deserve freedom," John called out, his voice carrying through the chamber. In a move that surprised even John, he managed to get behind the Emperor. Using all his strength, he grabbed the Emperor's head crest, the symbol of Archelian power, and pulled down hard. The Emperor, off balance from his own attacks, fell forward. John used the momentum to drive the Emperor's head toward the floor of the platform. The sound of the Emperor's head hitting the floor echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. Broadcasts across the galaxy showed the unthinkable. A primitive human physically dominating the supposedly superior Emperor. The Emperor wasn't seriously hurt. His exoskeleton protected him, but the symbolism was unmistakable. The myth of Archelian supremacy was shattered in an instant. "No species is born to rule others," John said, his voice carrying in the silence. "Not even yours." For 3 heartbeats, the entire Senate chamber was frozen in shock. Then chaos erupted. Security. Forces rushed the platform. John knew he couldn't fight them all. He had done what he came to do. As guards surrounded him, he didn't resist. His message had been delivered, but something unexpected happened. Senator Zelpax stood up, his voice booming across the chamber. "Stop. This human has shown us the truth." Other senators began to stand as well. The screen still showed the underground's evidence of the Emperor's crimes. "The human stays alive," shouted another senator, a floating, cloud-like being. "We demand an emergency Senate session now." More voices joined in. The security forces hesitated, unsure what to do. The Emperor was on his feet again, his head crest bent slightly from John's attack. "Arrest this human," the Emperor ordered, his voice shaking with rage, "and shut down those false broadcasts." But the screens kept playing the evidence. Ryan and the underground had done their job well. The control systems were locked out. A tall, tree-like senator moved to the center of the chamber. "I call for an immediate vote of no confidence in Emperor Zolkrax." The chamber erupted in shouts of agreement from hundreds of senators. Others looked uncertain or afraid. But the balance was shifting. John found himself surrounded not by security forces, but by senators from various worlds. They formed a protective circle around him. "The human will testify," Senator Zilpax announced. "The Senate will hear the truth about Earth and the Emperor's crimes." Over the next several hours, John watched in amazement as the Galactic Confederation began to change before his eyes. The Emperor was placed under guard. Evidence was reviewed. John told his story, and other humans in the Senate building came forward to tell theirs. Lisa found John during a break in the proceedings. "You actually did it," she said, her eyes wide with disbelief. "The underground is coming out of hiding. Karen is addressing the Senate in the next session. John was tired but satisfied. What happens now? Everything changes, Lisa said. Some senators are already calling for Earth to be contacted officially. Others want the Emperor to face justice for crimes against thousands of worlds. 3 days. Later, John stood with Karen and a group of senators as they drafted a new agreement. The Archelian Empire was over. The Senate would rule itself, with representatives from all worlds having equal votes. Earth will be contacted within the month, Senator Zalepax told John. Your world will be welcomed as equals, not as servants. John thought about the shock his world would experience. It won't be easy. Earth isn't united like your worlds. No, Karen agreed. But humans adapt quickly. That's what the Emperor feared. A week later, John found himself aboard a sleek ship heading for Earth. With him were Karen, Lisa, and several other humans who had been taken over the years. They would be the first official delegation to Earth. John looked out the window as the ship entered Earth's solar system. He had left as a prisoner. He was returning as part of a diplomatic mission that would change human history forever. We're approaching Earth, the pilot announced, preparing for communication with their authorities. John took a deep breath. He still had the data crystal with messages from humans to their families. He would deliver it, as promised. They'll probably think we're making first contact, Lisa said. They don't know aliens have been visiting for years. They'll learn the truth, John replied. All of it. The ship slowed as it approached Earth's moon. On a screen, John could see his blue home planet growing larger. Ready to make history again? Karen asked, standing beside him. John nodded. Earth deserves its place in the galaxy, and the galaxy needs to learn that no species is too primitive to stand up for what's right. As the ship prepared to announce itself to Earth, John thought about his journey. From Marine to abductee, to the person who changed the fate of humanity. With one bold action, the ship's communication system activated. It was time for Earth to join the stars, not as servants, but as equals. And it had all started when one human stormed the Galactic Senate and slammed the Emperor's head on the floor.